So, I was under the impression that I had some money coming in, some funds. You can see my cold breath in this cold shed. Anyway, we're getting some back pay, as sometimes happens in large workforces. We're supposed to have gotten a pay rise a long time ago. They just work it out, it takes ages, they argue and argue and argue, and then, bam, they make a decision, they put it through, and then they have to pay you all of the money you should have been making because they couldn't sort it out anyway. I was expecting something like that to come through. The word was that it was going to be enough money to be able to comfortably buy a high-end knife. So I thought, I'm going to buy myself a high-end flipping knife. I haven't got one of those yet. Maybe a Spyderco Mantra. Maybe a zero tolerance Sinkovich. Maybe a zero tolerance 0220, that lovely new Jens Anso design. So I waited, and my paycheck came in, and the tax man took most of it. He took most of what was to be a nice bonus. Sure, I can get it back fairly soon when I start doing my tax in July, but it's not now, is it? But I still wanted to buy a flipper knife. So I looked on the internet, and I chose the Kershaw Chill. Let's have a look at my consolation prize. Am I making lemons out of lemonade, or am I making lemonade out of lemons? Let's take it to tabletop and have a look. So what do I get for my $45 plus postage from Aussie Knives Kershaw Chill? Well, you get a knife that feels fairly similar to the Skyline that I had, but actually a little bit more agile. This is a Chinese made knife. I'll go over the specs first up. You've got a blade length of 3.1 inches, 7.9 centimeters. That's a total cutting edge, I think. The blade is, I guess, slightly longer because it starts back a little ways. Got a closed length of the knife at 3.9 inches, 9.8 centimeters. You've got an overall length when it's opened of 7 inches. You've got a weight of 2 ounces, very, very lightweight. That's 56.7 grams in metric. The width across the widest point of the knife, which is the flipper plus the hump of the knife, that is 2.8 centimeters, which is 1.25 inches roughly. That is the longest point, putting the flipper there. It's a line locking knife, as you'll find most flippers are, line locking or frame locking knives. Axis locking now, the advent of the Benchmade Pursuit, I think it's called, but anyway, very common little knife design this, liner lock flipper. The steel of the blade, it's not M4 unfortunately, and surprisingly it's not LMAX either. For your $50-ish, you get HCR 13 MOV made in China, like most of the budget Kershaw knives. And that's okay with me as well. For the amount I'm paying and for the intention behind this knife, which is really just something to play with, perhaps get me excited for my next proper high-end flipper purchase. That's just fine. I'll probably use this as a work knife. It does fit really nicely in the pocket. The best thing about this, a thin knife like this, it fits really good against things like, what have I got on me? Say next to a wallet. Fits quite well next to a wallet. Whereas say if I get out my, I don't know, cold steel American Lawman, that's a fair bit thicker, isn't it? In fact, it's almost twice as thick. Much, much bigger knife in general. Just for size comparison. That's quite stark, isn't it? Anyway, that aside, I really, really do enjoy the thickness of this knife. The handles are G10 handles, and it has a reversible tip up or tip down, right hand carry only. Sorry lefties. Just check the factory edge. Now I've read all my stats out, we can cut the stats sheet up. Oh yes. typical of 8CR13, it does come and take a fairly sharp edge. A sharp, if slightly uneven edge, I'm thinking. It feels a little bit duller here than it does up here. Yeah, the tip is very sharp. Yes, the knife doesn't seem to get sharp until about this point here. That's interesting. Let's have a closer look at that. Is it because it's actually quite wide ground up until about there? That would probably be it. And that's just a part of mass manufacturing. Certainly not going to get a hand ground knife. What you are getting is an R.J. Martin design knife, if that means anything to you. It means a little bit to me. I've seen some of his custom knives, I think, and they are sort of very much a little elegant. Well, the ones I've seen are quite elegant and quite nice. And yeah, I guess it's cool for him. It must be a cool way for these custom makers to just pull a little bit of extra cash in to be able to pursue their more artistic endeavours. But yeah. It does cut paper quite well. What it doesn't do quite so well is slice material that needs to follow the blade, so things like apples and stuff. It kind of cracks them apart just because it's what you'll get with a shorter blade like this. With a nice big blade like this, boom, you get, even though it's a little bit thicker, just a little bit thicker, you get all this space for them to taper the ground down really nicely. See, this is a hollow ground as well, and so is this. But this will slice a whole lot better for an apple than this one because it's just nice and incremental. The angle is steeper, and I mean steeper as in running up a steep hill. The angle on this one is a little bit shallower, so you're making more of a wedge rather than a thin sort of sliver rather. So that's what you get there. But the trade-off is, as I said, a very pocketable knife. So it just depends on how many apples you're going to slice and if you're entering those apples into neat slicing competitions. If you are going to Apple Slice 2016, which I believe is held somewhere in Tasmania, then you'd probably want to take your Cold Steel American Lawman or perhaps a Spyderco or similar. However, if you just slice up apples to eat and put in your mouth and do other things that you do with sliced apples, then this knife will do you just fine. It's just it won't be as pretty a job of it. A bit like this knife here, my stalwart favourite, the Benchmade 940. Look at that light just catching the blade. Almost ominous, isn't it? Very, very similar sort of thicknesses of blades there. You see what I mean? And this too isn't the best slicer, but it cuts like crazy. Cutting and slicing, two kind of different things. Cutting is when you're just moving through a small amount of material. Slicing is where it just needs to kind of keep going and make the end product a slice, I guess. So nice and flat. 8CR13 will do just fine on natural materials, like this wood here. It'll hold its edge, for a fairly long time on wood, because wood doesn't really rough up steel the same way that things like, believe it or not, paper does. So even wood, even with cuts like this, you're really just starting it with the edge and then the grind is doing the rest. Get that on camera. So you start it with the edge. I know I'm crossing the grain a bit, so that does do a little bit, I guess, of damage to the edge. I must get that in focus. So, as I was saying, so you dig the knife in. Once you're in, it's really about this part of the knife doing it. So it's why I've always said that you don't need super steels for woodworking knives. You just need sharp initial edges, and they'll generally hold that for a fairly long amount of time. So it's a fine steel for that. However, everyday carry knives, you're generally not going to be doing that as much as you're going to be doing, this type of thing. So it's probably why I have decided to sort of limit my cheapy knives and go for my pricey knives. But for a cheapy knife, this one is quite good. And most importantly, being a flipper knife, it flips extremely well. The only way, even I was just trying to make it not flip. You have to really do a slow trace down the spine for it to not flip. But if you do the light switch method, which is kind of where you just push it on like you would the edge of a light switch, you just kind of push down towards the best way of saying it. Say if this is a light switch and the handle is the wall, just kind of like flick down turning off the light. There we go. That's how you practice at home if you don't have a flipper knife. Just go around your house, turning off all the lights really fast, trying to just use the tip of your finger on the edge of the light, and you'll be turning those lights off so fast, your parents will be like, what? Or whoever you live with, you're like, man, the light was on and now it's not. You must have been really quick on that switch. So, but yeah, this is a tremendously well flipping knife. Impressive especially because, as far as I can see, it's got a couple of very thin bronze washers and then some Teflon washers as well, I think. I'm going to take it apart, but that's what I think. So it flips exceedingly well, which, in my opinion, is the appeal of flippers. Flippers you buy because you don't buy it doesn't matter really how quickly you can open a knife, especially when arguing between two one-hand opening knives. I mean, this is probably the slowest the American lawman. Quick, open your knife. Okay, it's open. Right. Quick, open your knife. Okay, it's open. Quick, open your knife. Okay, it's open. Yeah, it got quicker and quicker, but I still could have used this one for the urgent cutting task that was at hand. So it's really just a thing. Flippers are, still don't quite get it. They're super fun, but I think they make more out of it. It's just because they're super fun is why they're selling so well. Because really, there isn't really a circumstance that I think you're going to be using your everyday carry knife for that you're going to need it super fast. I mean, even if a bear's charging at you, I mean, come on. You're still going to die because A, you've got a knife this big, and if this is your first and last line of defense, you're going to die. But really, the flipper's more just to play with. It's a perfectly valid way of opening a knife, but I can't quite see why every new knife has to be a flipper. It's like, I guess, but then it's not even that new. I don't get it myself. I just don't get it. I'll stop talking about it because I've not got much more constructive to say, but this knife flips very well, and it is very fun to play with. However, I guess I'll say one more thing about flippers. There are very few discreet ways of opening flipper knives because it makes such a sound, and people won't understand that you've just used a flipper. They'll think you've used an automatic knife. So you just need to be aware of that. In Australia, it's all about not drawing attention to yourself when you're using a knife for daily tasks. That's one of the main things that will get you attention. You can carry a knife in Australia. Yeah, you're not supposed to, but you can carry a knife in Australia if you're just not a knob about it and just don't draw attention to it. Because it's how you present the knife that's going to cause the suspicion. If a policeman is coming and talking to you about your knife, then you've probably been showing it off and someone's seen you using it that shouldn't have seen you using it. So just be sensible. I get my packages from the post office, right? And I don't open them in the post office open the No, I get to my car and then I open them in my car where there's, it's a controlled environment. It's just that sort of stuff that, And so it's very difficult to be discreet with a flipper in any sort of circumstance. You can open a knife like this, you can sort of just go click, do a little bit of cutting, and no one's going to sort of see the flash of steel, whereas flippers, you just need to be a bit more careful. That's all I'm saying. I'll stop the monologue on flippers now, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. So, if you are thinking of a cheap flipper knife, I think this is probably one of the better ones to get. I like this more than the Skyline, to be honest. The steel's not going to stay as sharp as long, but 14C 28N on the Skyline, it's still not like this. It's still not S30V. It's probably about halfway between that and this. So you're still going to be sharpening it occasionally. S30V gets to the stage where you can just strop it. This is going to be, you're going to be sharpening this steel from time to time, and that's fine. It's a cheaper knife, and it's what you pay for. When this is as sharp as this, though, for your everyday tasks, they're as good as each other. They'll cut what they need to cut. No problem at all. So in terms of a cheap knife, I do like this more than the Skyline, and it is about half the price of what you pay for a Skyline in Australia. So really, really do recommend the Kershaw Chill. I'll just show you a couple of images of it in pocket and just a couple of close-ups, and then that will probably be the review. Alrighty, see you dudes later.